Thank you for having me here. It's been an encouragement in the short time I've been here to be with you all. The sense I have, I was just sharing with our sister Karen, is that the Lord is at work, and I am curious to see what the Lord will do with this. There's always what we are doing, there's always that which we are attempting to do, and there's that which the Lord is doing. And what we want to be a part of is what God is doing. And from the turnout that I can see here and the wide diversity of the people who have shown up here, I'm curious and eager to see what will come out of this in the next 50 years, what changes we shall realize in our country, perhaps even our continent, because of this little movement that I'm seeing in front of me. Well, the topic I've been invited to speak on is the need for classical Christian education in the church in Africa. And it's a little message, it's a little talk that I'm about to give us, about 10 to 15 minutes. But it's a good question for us to ask. Why are we here this very morning? Why is this important for us? It's something that's clearly different. It's something that has arrived that we were not brought up in. Our parents were not brought up in this. So why should we take this conversation about classical Christian education seriously as the African church? Well, given I'm a Baptist, I have 3 points for you this morning or this afternoon. And the first one is worship. Worship. I do not think there could be a more important reason I could bring to you than the reason of worship. Ultimately, all that we do ought to fall under this one umbrella of worshiping God. So let me even begin with that and ask you the question, is that what has attracted you so far to this? I pray that you will have grand reasons as to why you're doing this, and that you will push off puny reasons, i.e., or for example, reasons like it is new, it is different, it's a fad, we want something unique, it is unique to other things, it is bougie, for those of you who speak the local language of Nairobi. Don't take up any of those small reasons. You were created to worship God. That's what you were created to do. And this particular form of education is meant to aid us towards that very end. Let me throw out for you a couple of verses here that have led me to be so passionate about classical Christian education. Think of John 3:35. The Father loves the Son and has given all things into his hand. What things? All things. There are no limitations when it comes to the things that have been entrusted to the Son. The Son's domain does not end at the edges of the property of your local church. The Son's domain does not end with the ending of your Sunday routine. So that when you wake up on Monday, that's another domain that belongs to others and not the Son and not the King. The one who created all things, Genesis 1 and 2, the cosmos, the heavens and the earth, is the one who we're being told here has entrusted all of those things to the Son. Here are a couple of other verses, and I would really encourage you to do a little study for yourself of this little phrase, all things. John 13 verse 3 will repeat the same idea just before he washes the feet of the disciples. It says, Jesus then, knowing that the Father had entrusted to him all things and that he had come from the Father and was going back to the Father, he washed the disciples' feet. But Romans 11:36, you know this verse? For from him and through him and to him are what? Are all things. All things have come from him. Listen to Ephesians 1:22. This is the plan, the grand plan that the Father is working out, that is being realized in what the Son has accomplished in his death, burial, and resurrection. Listen to the way it's summarized. And he put all things under his feet and gave him as the head over all things to the church, which is his body, the fullness of him who fills all in all. You see, there's a little thing going on in the Bible. From the very beginning to the very end, the author of all things, God, Genesis 1 and 2, seems to have been thwarted by Genesis 3, isn't it? It's like the plan has been undone. Sin has entered into the world. What will happen to God's purposes to bring to himself glory through what? All things in heaven and on earth. They have that one purpose. Oh, but that purpose seems to have been thwarted by the serpent, by the entrance of sin, so that the things that were meant to reflect the glory of God no longer do. As human beings are filling the earth, what's filling up the earth is violence. That's chapter 6 of Genesis. Not the image bearers who are subduing all things for the purposes of the ultimate king. There's something different that's happening. But you see the redemption plan? That original purpose of creation, Genesis 1 and 2, will be redeemed through who? Through Jesus. In the work that he has done, it will not stop with the salvation of our souls. The work that Jesus has done means to redeem all things back to their original aim, which was worship, which was to put on clear display the glory of God. And so that's why the book of Ephesians, which is telling us this, is focusing on the local church, because the local church is the beginning of that new creation. The church is where that work has begun. Jesus has inaugurated that new creation by rising up from the grave with a glorious body. This is what we shall be when we too experience that. So that right now, as the church is growing, what is happening is it is the very beginning of that which will finally come to culmination, when the heavens and the earth are all made new. And on that day, every single thing will fulfill its original purpose. So hear this. Why should we be excited about this? Because we want ourselves and for our children to see grammar and logic and rhetoric and arithmetic, geometry, music, astronomy, to see all of those things as belonging to who? To God. Not to see those things as, well, that's not Sunday school. So those things belong to someone else, to something else. But to see, we have had our eyes opened and view this world in accordance to how it was actually designed to be. And for those little kiddos to be taught in light of that reality. For that is what is actually true. So that they would be inspired with all of the wonder that is available in math. See, there's wonder in math, where a formula is done and you go like, wow, that did that? That's incredible. And for them to say what? How glorious is God? How infinitely wise is our God? Because arithmetic belongs to him. Is that what your experience was in the 844 system? Wasn't what was going on, was it? There wasn't a curriculum or a tutor that was bent on seeking to help you see the wonders of God in all of those particular studies. Well, I know that I've been created to worship. And I know that my little 3 munchkins have been created to worship. And that the field available for them to explore the wonder and the glory of their God is endless. And so as they move from topic to topic, all they ought to be seeing is, oh my goodness, my God is so great. That's why I love classical Christian education, and I think this is one of the reasons why we as a church can be excited about it, because it helps us with this core calling of being worshipers. Worldview, we need cohesion. We need cohesion. When you think about worldview, really I'd want to put it under even the topic of discipleship or disciple making. What our King did when he rose from the grave, he said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go and make disciples of all nations. So hear this. You again, we might have come here for many good reasons. Good reasons. I want to put all those good reasons under a greater reason, which is why we started off by speaking about worship as a greater reason and calling, right? But guys, making disciples is a key thing. It's a key mandate that has been given to you by your God. Of the things that you will give an account for on the last day. This will be one of them, because the King told you, go and make disciples. And I believe that a classical Christian education helps us towards that very end. And as the church in Africa, we ought to see education as a key primary tool in accomplishing that Great Commission. So again, here's what I'm urging us to do. Away with puny reasons why to do this. The two small ones, just sweep those away. Man, there are some grand reasons why to do this. We want to train up the next generation and teach them to have a Christian worldview of all that they see. So let me ask you the question, like what is true? What is true? And how do we know what truth is? Is the world struggling with figuring that out right now? My goodness, it is, isn't it? What is real? What is even real? What is a boy or a girl? I think we're seeing this thing still on TV, but you know they're coming. What is right? What is right? What is right and what is wrong? Do you want the type of education that provides a worldview whereby those questions are answered on the basis of society's most carnal and base lusts? So that whatever that society or culture at that particular time desires is what they turn and they decide, this is what is true, this is what is right, this is what is real. What lenses will we use to answer those all-important questions? Classical Christian education is going to help us out with this. So that I still remember quite specifically when President Obama came to Kenya and he was pushing the LGBTQ agenda. And Uhuru gave a really interesting answer. President Uhuru gave a really interesting answer, isn't it? He said, this is not African. Do you remember hearing this? He said, this is not African. And when I go to the States, many people go like, oh, that we were so encouraged by that. I'm like, I'm not encouraged by that answer. Because what if what is African next century is something different? Then off we go. Keeping up with the times. Nothing stable, nothing sure, nothing convictional, whereby we can be able to say, this is what is real. This is what is true. This is what is right. And those questions are not based on the latest polls that have been run on the streets. They are based on the basis of the Bible. It is a biblical worldview that we have given to our kids that they are using now to interpret the world and answer those questions with. An educational system that is not committed to laying down a biblical worldview will undermine your duty to make disciples. So get yourself an education. Get your kids an education that is aiding you to fulfill that most important command given to you by King Jesus, which is to make disciples. The last point I have is it is Western. I know. Don't start rebuking me. Notice the irony of it's likely that you'd be rebuking me in English. There's a place for us to be a bit more realistic. That even though we are proud Africans, I'm a very proud African, right? In reality, I cannot be as African as I want to be because of the limitations that are there. There's no lying or no hiding from the fact that this classical part of the education, the Christian is ours, eh? Let's be clear on that. That is, we have as much a right to that as anybody else does. But the classical part, you'd better come to terms with the fact that it is Western. And maybe I came here to break the news, just in case we didn't quite have that. And I had a question asked to me once by an American sister who I dearly love and loves us. And she was like, why would you do this? Why would you do classical Christian education? Because the reason we do it as Americans is it helps us be able to understand the heritage of our Western civilization. Basically, where did we come from? That's why I do it. Why do you do it as an African? So I think it's a valid question to ask as you're sitting inside here. Interestingly, I sit back and I basically give the same answer right back. And I say, well, because it is African. And that's because it is Western. And I say, and there requires some level of humility in owning up to that. Africa as a continent has been influenced negatively in many different ways by the West. We know, you and I know quite clearly that West is not always best. We know that, don't we? And yet the influence of the West is coming our way. Like, we can't see, look at how I'm dressed right now. Right? I mean, I could go and buy that key shirt, but that's not how I dress normally. Netflix, social media, it is coming down upon us, right? And it is shaping how we think and how we live and what we value. When you are approaching education, and what you're doing is a Christian classical education, that's what you're pursuing. What you're doing is you're pushing away all of the bad stuff, isn't it? And you're wanting to go there and shop and ask, what is truly helpful? What is truly good that as an African, I could borrow from you that would truly be helpful? And I'm going to go back to the time when, as a civilization, you produced that which was best. That ancient Greek and Roman time, and you look at the things that were produced then and the approach to education then that led to that type of a civilization, and you say, this is good. I will be discerning and choosy about what I will take from the West and what I will not take from the West. I've had the privilege of standing in a square in Cologne, Germany. Now, this is multiple centuries after even the time frame that we're talking about as far as ancient Greek and Roman time. But I've stood there. You could think about Rome and the Colosseum and other forms of architecture that's there. And since we are talking frankly here, I've stood there and I've thought about when they built these things. And I've asked myself, kwani shida yetu ni gani? Is that a fair question? Well, how? Like there's architecture, and then there's worship. There's just like glory. There's just incredible accomplishments. And I've asked myself, like, how? Why? And I am covetous, I think in a holy way. For my own people to be trained up, to be readied for such feats for the sake of his name. So when you're listening to a piece of music, have you listened to Handel's Messiah? It's easily the most glorious piece of music that has ever been written. No question about it. I'm happy to fight you on this. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Oh. And then you hear the orchestra behind it. Dun, dun. It's beautiful, isn't it? It's glorious. If I'm going shopping around the world, I want my little kiddos to be taught in such a way that is steps towards, building blocks towards. If this is what God has called them, to be able to be image bearers in the world, contributing towards things that will reflect His glory, His beauty, His creativity. So I will acknowledge happily that this is West. I will acknowledge happily and say this is not distinctly African. But then I will say this: I have aspirations that one day it will be. Because we are in no way lesser. We are image bearers just as anybody else is. The capacities that those people had were given to humans as the apex of God's creation. Those were not distinctly Western capacities, Western abilities. They are human abilities. And that's what we are. As image bearers, I would want us to go back and say, you know what? We will humble ourselves and we will learn those principles of how you approached education in that particular time. Those disciplines and areas that you focused in. And we will seek to take the best of what we can take from the West and educate ourselves down here and pray that one day the architecture that will typify Africa, it might not be in our lifetime, might be 200 years from now if the Lord tarries. Might be something that reflects the goodness of God, not a particular type of greed that just builds buildings that are this narrow, that go 20 stories up. I don't want to brag about that being African. Don't give me any of that, please. Thank you very much. I'll pass. I want to be taught a different way. And whether it is Western or not, I will happily take it. So, why should we as a church in Africa pursue classical Christian education? Because of worship. It will help us be able to better worship our God in all things that we do, leaving no sphere outside of His realm or His rule. Because it's going to help equip us with a biblical world view so that we can answer life's most important questions biblically. And we will happily take that even if it is Western. Amen? Thank you very much.